All rise for the jury.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. Folks ready to get to work? Let's do it then. Counsel.
Sir, when we finished off before the break, we were talking about what happened after the fireball explosion forced you out of the home. Do you remember that?
Yes, sir.
I want to talk about that fireball for a moment. You threw three terms out there of things that you typically see with a fireball. Do you recall that?
Yes, sir. A backdraft, smoke explosion, and a flashover.
Okay. You explained what a backdraft is and how this wasn't that. Go through and explain for me what a smoke explosion is.
Smoke explosion is, a lot of people will confuse a smoke explosion with a backdraft. Mainly what's the difference being is that backdraft has that sudden interjection of fresh oxygen, and it literally explosively ignites towards that oxygen source. A smoke explosion is basically, in a fire, a typically well-involved fire, all that black smoke you see is unburned fuel. And the fire gets hot enough that it ignites all of that fuel at once, or all that smoke at once. And it can be explosive, but not in the sense of like blowing out walls or just blowing firemen out of buildings like in the movie. It's just very sudden, very abrupt, that is very forceful, I guess, a forceful ignition of all the smoke and stuff.
And what are the things that you see when it's a smoke explosion?
Very thick, dark, pressurized smoke. I tell people it looks like the smoke is water billowing out. It can be pressurized, but it's like chocolate air. It just rolls out very poofy, very dark, very thick. You can't see your hand in front of your face. Very dark smoke.
Was that present in the home at the time that the explosion happened?
No, sir. None at all.
So, based on your training, your experience, were you able to rule out a smoke explosion as being the cause of what happened?
Yes, sir.
And then, I think that you used the term flashover?
Yes, sir.
Please explain what that is.
So flashover is a fire with very well oxygenated source. Windows are broken open. It's free burning, as we term it. It's like a really good going campfire. Except for in a residence, all that heat is contained within that box, inside a box. So that heat builds up. You have temperatures in excess of 1,100 degrees at the ceiling level. It bakes downward, and it basically causes everything to get to its ignition point, and all at once it ignites. But once again, it's typical of very extreme temperatures. I've been in a flashover. It's not comfortable. I've burned my skin through all my protective clothing. It's very high temperatures, and once again, it's also a lot of smoke, very dense smoke.
And describe the temperature that you were feeling when you were in this fire.
Virtually none at the entry.
So based on your training experience, were you able to eliminate flashover as being a cause of this fireball?
Yes, sir.
When you were in the home, looking for the possible 8-year-old girl, did you look around to see what the house looked like?
I tried to. It was like the left half of the entryway where I went in was lit and the other half wasn't. So my visibility was very poor, and I didn't have a thermal imaging camera to look. So my visibility and the speed in which I was moving, I didn't stop and really take a look, but I was looking for forms, things that a child would crawl underneath of, those kind of things, and I didn't encounter any of that in the right side. And that's when I came back around and said, you know what, conditions are changing. You get the hair back on your neck. You just kind of know it's time. And that's when I came around that entryway, and the the light that was in the entryway was getting a lot brighter, and that's when I knew conditions were changing. So,
What do you remember about the rooms that you did go into as far as furnished, unfurnished, things
it
like
appeared the right side was very sparsely furnished, like maybe, and at the time, I thought, is this home under construction or something? Just because it just didn't,
And
it
just
seemed.
what Your Honor, going to ask to, as non-responsive, his speculation, he was asked to describe it, he did. And his speculation as to what the potential cause is irrelevant.
I felt that it appeared to me that maybe the home was, like I said, it was like plywood floors or it was unfinished. So that's what I noticed about it.
Part of your job, I think you testified previously, is how fires begin. Can you start a fire simply by placing a match against some plywood in that manner?
Oh, I suppose you could, but it would be very difficult.
And why does it make it difficult?
Heat and surface area. You've got to heat something up to the point where it off gases, because the product itself doesn't burn. It's the vapor it off gases when it's heated that burns. So you have to raise something to its ignition temperature before it will readily ignite and burn.
How could you make something like that burn though?
An accelerant, a long exposed form of heat, blowtorch kind of thing. It takes a long time for raw wood to burn.
But an accelerant could be used to do something like that?
Yeah, and an accelerant could be also, it's not just gasoline, it could be used in glue products. You're referring to plywood, it could be glue products that could burn.
After you were fighting the fire, did you tend to anybody else in the house? You said that you were looking for an 8-year-old. What about anybody else?
No, it was, I did not personally. I saw my crew member, firefighter Russell, he was my team of two, if you will, that I was referring to. He was, when I came around to the front side of the home on one of many trips, I noticed that he was removing a female victim from the garage. But I did not tend to her.
And we'll talk about that in one moment. I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibits number 1, 2, and 3. Have you previously had an opportunity to review those, sir?
Yes, sir.
And what are those?
These are pictures that I took of the fire with a camera that we use on our fire apparatus.
Is it typical for you to take a picture while you're on scene at a fire?
Yes, sir.
And why do you do that?
I only do it if you can. I don't stop, get out and check for exposures or anything. I just do quick snaps, and it does a lot for, one, helping our fire investigators determine cause and origin. What was fire behavior like? What was the scene like? What did you do? What did people do? Because scenes can be pretty chaotic, and that timeline, in essence, gets recorded on your camera. So it doesn't always happen. It's not always opportune, but that's why they're so blurry and shaky. It's because I literally, as I'm running and doing something, I just stick the camera up and take a picture.
And in fact, these aren't all your pictures that you took that night, correct?
No, sir. I believe I took upwards of 20.
But as you described them, are they pretty blurry, hard to see what's going on?
Yes, sir.
As far as State's Exhibits numbers 1, 2, and 3, are those true and accurate copies of the pictures you took on November 16th, 2014?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, the State have moved to admit State's Exhibits numbers 1, 2, and 3.
No objection.
Exhibits 1, 2, and 3 will be admitted.
Ms. Barber, do you mind if we dim the lights, please? Yes, please. Showing to the jury what has been admitted as State's Exhibit number 1. You described the lawyers. What are we looking at here, sir?
This is, I believe, TR-21. It's a designated rescue crew that we use that took over fire operations in the front. They're getting ready to deploy a hose line and fight the interior fire you see. The fire that you see is actually, I believe, the first window to the right of the front entry. Yes, sir, where the dot is. And they are, after I got directed, this is after I got directed to the Charlie side. I'm coming back, and I just took a quick snap.
So this would have been after you went in?
Yes, sir, that's what.
And where I placed the dot on State's Exhibit number 1, is that the general area of the front door where you made entry into the home?
Yeah, I can't tell if that's the front door or the front window, but yeah, it's one or the other, yes, sir.
It's to the right of the garage, though?
Yes, sir.
Showing State's Exhibit number 2, what are we looking at here, sir?
This is the Charlie, or the back side of the home, where I was in charge. Eventually, I became in charge of the division. We divide things up geographically. I was in charge of all fire operations and overhaul operations and rescue operations on the Charlie side, and that's the back side of the residence there.
And what are these firefighters being directed to do at this point?
This was, as you can see, where the main portion of the fire has burned and been put out on the right side of the picture there. Yeah, this is later on when we are still not optimistic, but working towards potential rescue. You can see in the upper right window there's a glow. That's still working fire. There's actually a couple of bedrooms there. And I'm sending crews in to look for a potential 8-year-old female. That's what the report was, that we were looking for an 8-year-old girl.
You mentioned not being optimistic. Why is that?
Because it's in the later stages of fire. Clearly, fire produces all sorts of heat, toxic gases, and which they're lethal to the human. But you get emotionally committed to a fire like that, and you want closure for family as well as for the firefighters on the scene. And so we are, at this point, we actually had called off, and the radio transmission I had called earlier is that I believed it was unsurvivable. But we and the other firefighters and I met with the safety officer, decided to take some pretty calculated risks and send some people in to see if we could find an 8-year-old female.
And to be clear, nobody was found inside, correct?
No, sir.
And showing State's Exhibit number 3.
Yeah, this is, I believe this is a picture after I ordered a withdrawal. I had 2 firefighters almost fall through the floor. On the picture back, those windows, they almost fell through that floor, reported high fire conditions, high heat conditions. And you can see that pressurized smoke there. That stuff we don't like to go into, and those conditions there quickly can turn untenable. And as you can see, it's very difficult to get in and out of. So I ordered the withdrawal of the firefighters, and I believe it's Firefighter Russell and Lieutenant Putz that went in, or Sam Traxler. Both people I've sent in various couple of times to go in and look for the girl.
You mentioned that the floor was collapsing.
Yes, sir.
I'm assuming you're speaking of the second floor to the first floor?
Yes, sir. Second floor to the first.
Any indication that the roof was collapsing?
Oh, yeah. It was burning through, and whenever a roof burns through, it starts to sag due to the construction methods.
In addition to taking these pictures, did you also take video of this incident?
Yes, sir.
And how are you taking video?
The little point and shoot digital camera that we have has a video option. I think a couple of videos I didn't even know I was taking. It was bouncing around my leg and whatnot, but I was able to take some videos of some of it as I walked around the structure.
And I have put State's Exhibit number 38 in the machine here. Have you had an opportunity to review that?
Yes, sir.
Is that the video that you took?
Yes, sir.
Is it a true and accurate copy of the video that you took that night?
Yes, sir.
The state will move to admit State's Exhibit number 38.
No objection.
38 will be admitted.
First video here is about 8 seconds long. And when in the process is this going on?
This is not too far into the incident. I mean, after the initial main portion of the fire was put out, and those, I know, right in the lower right-hand corner, that's where the main body of the fire was coming out. It's shortly after that was what we refer to as knockdown. We'd get the main body of the fire knocked down. I would just believe I was just assigned the Charlie Division.
And just remind us again what it means to be on the Charlie Division.
So, yeah, it's like I said, we divide everything up geographically: Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta, meaning the front. If you're looking at the home, that would be the Alpha side. The left side would be the Bravo side. Back side would be Charlie side, and the right side would be the Delta side. And we also assigned fireground operations by those. So the Alpha side would be Alpha Division. I was Charlie Division, the back side.
Thank you, sir. And then showing again. And what are we seeing here in this video of State's Exhibit 38?
Once again, you can see the significant amount of fire that's still coming from the house. This is where we still were directing crews in an optimistic attempt to make rescue or recovery on floor 2. And this is where the camera is bouncing around my leg.
Were you aware that it was filming?
I think I was eventually, and then I picked it back up and started pointing it again. And yeah. Yeah, this is when I went around to the Delta side, which would be, if you're looking at the home, the right side of the home. And there's I remember I was directed back there because there was another room right there where you could see that fire in the lower portion. There's a room there that some firefighters wanted to go in and search, but through radio communications, I was able to determine the room had already been searched and been declared clear.
And is that the room that you entered?
No, sir.
You mentioned not wanting to go into the home when there's that type of smoke billowing out. Why is that, sir?
That smoke explosion component that I was telling you about, that all that is unburned products of combustion that can reignite. And if my firefighters are in the middle of it, and they did not have hose lines with them. So we were entering that structure with hose lines on the ground floor. But as I said earlier, they're very, very difficult to move around in. And if you want to get in and out very quickly and try to rescue someone, we don't want to carry a hose line with us during that. We want to be able to, if we have to, literally jump out a window.
Thank you, sir. You did not treat Miss Morgan for her injuries?
No, sir.
Did you observe her?
I did.
Where was she when you observed her?
When I came around the Bravo side of the home, or the left side of the home, if you're looking at it, that area between the garage and the home is really tight with a fence on the side of the home. I came back around on, and I don't know what for, to grab a piece of equipment, to do face-to-face communication. I'm not sure, just one of those multiple trips that I had made. I came around the corner, and firefighter Russell, my crew member, I came around that corner, and firefighter Russell had, when I came around the corner, was holding, he was kind of squatted over, and he had a female in his hands as he was pulling her out of the garage.
Were you able to observe her?
Yes, sir.
What did you observe?
I saw a middle-aged, well, I thought was a middle-aged woman that was bleeding profusely and looked like she had significant head trauma to the left side of her head. And what appeared to me was, and I wasn't certain at the time, but it looked like she had been burned on the chest. I just remember looking at those were burned, is what it looked like. It was a burned injury. It looked like her shirt and stuff was burned.
Were you present for treatment to be administered to her?
No, it was another trip, and I'm not sure if it was when I came back or I was going back again. I saw a paramedic, Kevin Miller. I saw my firefighter, Scott. I refer to my firefighter because he was assigned to my engine company. So he was kneeling down with the patient at the end of the driveway as paramedic firefighter Kevin Miller was coming over to start administering aid. And that I stopped, kind of took it in for a second, and then I went back to the Charlie side.
Based on your training, did it appear based on the injuries that she needed treatment immediately?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of blood.
And was treatment necessary for the defendant?
No, sir.
No further questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Just to clarify, captain, lieutenant, did you get a promotion since this happened?
No, and I apologize for that. Just recently, we settled our labor negotiations, and we did a name change from lieutenant to captain.
So you didn't have to pass an exam or move up in rank. They just made lieutenants such as yourself and Lieutenant Putz are now called captains?
No, I'll call it captains, yes, sir.
Okay. Does that change the duties that you have in your job?
Absolutely.
Okay. So what significant increase in duties do you now have as a captain that you didn't as a lieutenant?
So all captains now in the Lynnwood Fire Department are also qualified or certified to serve as a battalion chief, which is a shift chief for fire operations and emergency operations and day-to-day operations at the fire department. As I said earlier, I'm currently assigned as the C shift battalion chief.
Okay, so is that something new you had to do to take on this position from the position you held back at the time of your response to this fire?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you are not an arson investigator, right?
No, sir.
You are not a fire marshal, are you?
No, sir.
You have not undergone specific intensive training into things like electrical aspects of fire, investigation, sources such as that, correct?
Yes and no.
You provided a CV for yourself to the prosecutor's office.
Yes, sir.
In this case, correct? Does that list any specific
No, sir.
arson or fire source investigation training that you've undergone in your 23 years?
No, sir.
Okay. So you're speaking more from a practical rather than a training or sort of formal certification basis, correct?
I took, like I said earlier, I took a formal class in fire investigation, and the rest has all been on the job.
When did you take that class?
90s, mid-90s.
Okay. And you wrote a statement about your involvement in this case, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's, I think, you've had a chance to look at it before you came in to testify today, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's, I think we've had at least some reference to it as State's Exhibit 41.
Yes, sir.
And you wrote that statement out the very next day, November 17th, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you made that statement under penalty of perjury, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you were endeavoring to be as complete and certainly as accurate as you could with regard to the things you wrote in that statement on November 17th, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, in that statement, you indicate you were forced out of the front door by the fire that blew out the front side windows, correct?
Yes, sir.
There's no indication in your statement of any attribution of cause for that, is there?
Yeah, that'd be pretty hard to write.
Well, you actually, I think, got up on the stand and talked about your speculation of arson and propane, exploding propane cylinders, didn't you?
Absolutely.
Right, so is there any mention in your report that you believe that this was arson?
No, sir.
Any mention in your report that you would have any basis to believe that this was arson?
No, sir.
Now, in addition to writing your report under penalty of perjury, you took part in a recorded interview, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
With defense investigator Mr. Reeves and Mr. Stern, the prosecutor, one of the prosecutors on the case, was present, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Ms. Dahl from the prosecutor's office was present?
Yes, sir.
And your permission was asked in order to record that interview, correct?
Yes, sir.
And in the course of that interview, you talked about this ball of fire that came down the hallway, didn't you?
Yes, sir.
And you were specifically asked by Mr. Reed if you knew what caused that ball of fire, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
And it was you who brought up the idea of a backdraft. You talked about how under extreme conditions you could have a backdraft, but that didn't seem to be what had caused that fire, correct?
I don't recall that portion of the conversation, but it would be recorded, so it would be there.
And you do recall discussing backdrafts and whether that was what you experienced there in that house, don't you?
Not during that interview, no. But if it's on tape, I did. I just don't recall it.
And you recall that you were then specifically asked, do you have any explanation for what caused that fireball? And you said, no, I don't.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was on December 31st of last year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Since December 31st, have you had conversations with the prosecutors in this case about that fireball?
No, sir.
And about your speculation as to what could have caused that?
That all took prior to my interview with you and your counsel.
But this thought it might have hit a propane cylinder, thought it was arson. Any discussion about that with the state after you said in an interview with Mr. Stern present that you had no idea what would have caused that?
No, sir.
Any reason why people would have a reason to ask you today what you thought caused that fireball?
Objection, speculation.
Overruled.
You have any reason to know why someone would ask you today what you thought caused that fireball after you told people in a recorded interview you had no idea?
I kind of backing up a little bit, once again, looking at how we look at a house that's on fire, tactically speaking, you have to make judgment calls on what you're seeing. And like I said earlier, there's kind of a normal evolvement of fire. So when something stands out
to the question, please.
different from that, that's what makes you think that way.
Captain Turner,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you, is there any reason that you're aware of that someone would be asking you today for what you believe caused that you would have an answer to give other than, I don't know, as to what the cause of that fireball was? You tell anyone else any other causes other than I don't know.
I guess I'm not following your question, sir. I'm sorry.
Have you told anyone else since December 31st, when you told the investigator and Mr. Stern that you don't know, that you have no explanation for what caused that fireball? Have you told anyone since then something different than that?
I believe today under testimony they asked me directly what I would thought, why it was unusual or why I thought that fire acted that way.
And other than just being asked that today, have you had any conversation about that with anyone?
No, sir.
If a propane cylinder exploded, one would assume there would be pieces of a propane cylinder to be found by the fire marshal, wouldn't you?
Not necessarily.
Do they vaporize in your experience?
No, they call what's called BLEVE. It's called a boiling liquid vapor explosion.
Okay. And the cylinder
Explodes.
would disappear.
No, it would just rupture, typically where the valve assembly is at.
Right. So there would then be evidence of a ruptured propane cylinder if that was the cause, correct?
Yes.
And arson, is that a term of art? Do you mean something? You said two things, a flammable liquid fire and arson.
Mm-hmm.
by arson, are you specifically addressing whether something was an intentionally set fire?
Yeah.
Okay, that's outside your training and experience, isn't it?
No, I would not say that.
Okay. Are you an arson investigator?
No, sir.
Did you investigate the causes of this fire?
No, sir.
Did you go back in the house afterwards and look to see if there were electrical or other causes of this fire?
No, sir.
Did you go back in the house and examine as to whether, in fact, accelerants were ever found to be present inside the house?
No, sir.
But you know that Mr. Morgan's been accused of arson, don't you?
Yes, sir.
Did you smell gas when you went inside the house?
No, sir.
When you guided Mr. Morgan to the front of the fire engine, did you smell gas on his person?
No, sir.
When you went in that house, you also didn't smell any gas or any other accelerant inside that home, did you?
No, I just smelled smoke, fire.
Actually, in the course of the interview on December 31st, you were specifically asked, and you said you smelled nothing. No alcohol, no gas, no smoke. You didn't smell anything, right? Isn't that what you said?
If that's my testimony, and then that's my testimony.
Now, when you went into that house, in your report you indicated there was, in the entry, no fire and light smoke when you kicked the front door in, right?
Yes, sir.
And at the time you wrote your report, that's how you described how you entered the home, right?
Yes, sir.
You didn't say that you had shouldered it. You didn't say you turned the knob and walked in. You wrote in your report, you kicked the front door in, correct?
Yeah, and I don't recall doing so, but yes, that is what I wrote.
I understand it is many months since, but was the incident fresher in your mind on November 17th, 2014 than it is now?
Absolutely.
And when you were writing that statement under oath, you were trying to be accurate and correct, were you not?
I was trying to do the best I could.
And the best you could in being accurate and correct, because you knew your statement was being made under oath and might have to be relied on months later, correct?
Not really, no. I mean, you have to kind of, I don't think we ever went into the process. I never approached the home until the tools started adding, or the things started adding up weirdly, that we ever thought anything. So I tried to write an accurate statement the best they could at 6 o'clock in the morning, 7 o'clock in the morning, whenever it was, actually never thinking that I would be sitting here today.
Okay, so let's
So
back
I
up.
did the best I could.
You wrote a statement under penalty of perjury, correct?
Yes, sir.
You were attempting to be truthful when you wrote the statement, correct?
I was being truthful.
Okay. And no one told you what to write or placed a time limit on you in writing, did they?
Yeah, I needed to get it before I went home. I needed to have the statement done before I went home. Yes, sir.
And has anyone since then stopped you from writing an additional statement or providing additional information about this?
No, sir.
And your words were that you kicked the front door in, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, actually, under your policy, you have sort of a little catchphrase, try before you pry, right? When it
It's
talks
not-
about entering
It's not a
doors.
policy. It's an anecdotal. Yeah.
So is that something you do, that before you enter a doorway and enter a house, you try before you pry, right? You try the door before you kick it or shoulder it or force it open, correct?
If you think about it, you do.
Now, in this case, you kick the door in. Do you have any specific recollection whether you made effort to open the door?
No, sir, like I said, I don't even recall kicking the door in.
And as you reflected in your report, after you kicked the door in, no fire came out and there was light smoke, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I just want to be clear because this morning you testified that when you opened the door there was no smoke, right?
You know, I have this image in my head that clearly shows what the front of the entry, like I said, it was like as if someone had turned the light on. And the door was open. Like I said, I don't know how I got the door open. There was no heat, and if there was at all little smoke, light smoke, it was, like I said, it was very tenable. That's why I made that risk to go in, or a decision to go in. I have this vision in my head. I don't know how to, I'm not Stephen King. I can't write a good paper about it or a story about it. I can tell you what I see.
Okay. But the visions that you have in your head now, as opposed to when you wrote your report on the 17th, were those impacted by the conversations you had with the prosecutor before the defense interview, before emails you sent him with the video and the photographs?
No, sir.
Because you did have conversations about this and about your involvement, didn't you?
Yes, that's when I met with, the same day I met with your representative.
But you had conversations with the prosecutors after that, didn't you?
No, sir, not that I recall. I know that I contacted them because I found these during labor negotiations. I found a file folder. I was looking for a specific file type. Is when I found these folders and these pictures on a folder. So I don't know if I contacted your office then or via email, but I don't recall. I recall reaching out to them with I have these pictures.
Do you recall in February of this year sending an email to Mr. Stern, not just providing the resume, but referencing a conversation you had with him about the garage door and leading you to subsequently send him these photographs you've testified about today in the video?
Yeah, that was the same day that I met with your representative. The conversation in which I'm referring to.
And when you entered that front entryway, you made a loop to your right, about 10 feet, correct?
Approximately.
Into the living room of the house.
Yeah, living room, whatever that area is, yeah.
Okay. And you described that in the interview as essentially the equivalent of making snow angels on your stomach or swimming. You were going on the ground.
Yeah, I don't recall the technique. I mean, what we do is we typically, when visibility is limited, I'm 44 years old now. I don't get on my belly and swim around on floors too much anymore. My back's had a few injuries, but I do the best I can, and typically you stay low, you're on your knees, and you typically try to sweep out with an arm or a leg, or you stomp it around, trying to feel for a human.
Okay, so I'm not asking about what you typically do. I'm asking about what you said in an interview about this case with the prosecutor present. Did you say that when you made that loop, you were on your belly as if swimming, like making snow angels as you went into that room?
I don't ever recall saying that I was on my belly doing snow angels. Maybe the snow angel motion with hands and legs, but I mean, if you have the tape, if I said it, I said it.
Did you describe it as swimming? Were you referring to a backstroke into the room?
I don't think I would refer to it as a backstroke, sir, no.
And the fact of the matter is, the room that you went into had oak floors, didn't it? Not plywood, but actual oak floors in the living room of the house when you went to the right, correct?
May have.
And in your time in the house, you found, you smelled no gas or accelerant, correct?
No, sir.
You found no gas cans or propane tanks, did you?
No, sir.
Now, you said that when you first saw Mr. Morgan, he was being helped by then Lieutenant Putz, correct?
I don't know that Lieutenant Putz had any physical contact with him, but it looked like they were together, like maybe he was corralling him, if that makes any sense.
And you didn't, in your interview or in your statement, you said you first saw Lieutenant Putz with a person identified over radio as the first victim, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that in your interview, you said you first saw him before your engine pulled up with, for a period with Lieutenant Putz helping this person who was on the ground in the yard of the house or at some property before you then lost him for view and you pulled up your engine, correct?
Lieutenant Putz, and it looked like the gentleman, like I said, my initial thought was he was intoxicated just because he was stumbling around. That's the image that I had, and Lieutenant Putz was, like I said, trying to corral him until I lost sight of him and we got closer to the incident.
Okay. Now, were you designated to provide EMT or paramedic treatment to Mr. Morgan?
No, sir.
But you were aware that treatment was provided to Mr. Morgan and he was taken to the medic on a gurney, right?
Later in the incident, I was made aware of that he had gone to the hospital or had been treated, yes.
And prior to going to the hospital, you were aware of the fact that he had been provided, that he was directed, that officers, fire officers were directed, EMT or EMT firefighters or paramedic firefighters were directed to provide him with care there at the scene, correct?
Actually, no, sir. And initially, I did not know that in the incident.
And the extent, and because your responsibility was in an effort to try and address the fire, correct?
Well, as I said earlier, yes, I was directed, but all patients, all victims receive priority. And like I said, my initial contact with him, I looked at him, I did not feel that he needed any medical treatment. So then I went to suppression.
Did you check his O2 level?
No, sir.
Did you check his throat?
No, sir. It was, like I said, it was a physical or visual exam only.
Right, a visual exam. Did you visually examine his throat or for concerns about smoke inhalation?
No, sir.
Did you physically examine his head for concerns about concussion?
No, sir.
Okay, so your visual exam consisted of walking alongside him as he was taken back to the engine to be treated by the EMT paramedics.
No, that would be inaccurate, sir. He walked himself over to the front of engine 14 and kind of laid himself down. And it was that kind of that stumbling
There's
thing.
no question. I might just have one more. No other questions, thank you.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Yes.
You are not an arson investigator.
No, sir.
Are you familiar with what they do?
Absolutely.
Have you worked with them before?
Extensively.
When do arson investigators do their investigation?
From the moment they get our phone call, they start the process.
Do they enter the home like you did?
Eventually.
Eventually. Do they go in when the fire is raging and you're looking for an 8-year-old girl?
Absolutely not.
Are you here as part of your testimony to tell us, based on your training, that this was arson?
No, sir.
You were inside that fire. Was it a backdraft?
No, sir.
Was it a smoke explosion?
No, sir.
Was it a flashover?
No, sir.
Can you say it wasn't arson?
As I said earlier, I mean, it's not a yes or no. I don't mean to be obtuse. Things add up. When you approach a scene methodically and you're looking at something, you're looking for the norm. And the things that aren't normal stand out. And when a non-heated, non-smoke environment, you know, no heat, all these things, and there's really nothing to burn. I mean, the entry of the home wasn't stacked with newspapers and clothing and things, and all of a sudden a ball of fire blows you out. Those are the anomalies. Those are the things that make you go, what? And that's what led me to believe there's gasoline or there's something going on. This is arson. And then, of course, you get back to the home later on, and you're later on in the incident, you're evaluating this thing constantly, and you're doing it for safety reasons. And you're constantly second guessing yourself and to ensure the safety of your personnel that you're in charge with. So when you're looking at these things and you're seeing fire over here and fire over there and none of it's connected, you start getting this picture of like, this is not a normal fire. Why is it burning this way? That's what leads me down the path of this is an arson fire or a flammable liquid or some form of flammable product is either got ignited, somehow ignited, or whatever, and that's what leads you down that path. That's why I thought that.
Mr. Wackerman's correct, is he not, that had this been a propane tank that exploded, we would expect to hear testimony about pieces of a propane tank
Yes, sir.
in the fire, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What about if it was gasoline? Based on your training experience, what evidence of the gasoline would we find?
I would imagine you'd find sporadic char pattern or burning, sources of fire or areas of fire that aren't necessarily connected, or if they are connected, deep-seated fire over here, very little fire here, if any, and maybe fire over here, specific types of burn patterns that maybe aren't consistent with natural fire growth.
And those disconnected fires that you're speaking of, and are those things that you saw that night?
Yes, sir.
You had contact with the defendant, Mr. Morgan, albeit for a short amount of time, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you see any injuries to him whatsoever?
I did not see any injuries to him.
Had you seen anything that caused you concern, would you have just left him?
Absolutely not. No. He would have been priority number one.
I have no further questions, thank you.
So you wrote your report on November 17th and make no mention of any reason to suspect potential arson or use of flammable accelerants, correct?
Yes, sir.
But somehow, as time passes and things may not add up, that would certainly cause someone to, as you said, start getting a picture, right? That's what you just told us? Isn't that what you just told us?
Could you repeat that, sir?
That you're constantly second guessing, and that over time you start getting a picture, right? That's what led you to your testimony today? That's what you've just testified?
I believe the quote, second guessing, you're taking out of context, and that I'm not second guessing my testimony, if that's what you're referring to.
No, your initial statement not to attribute any claims of arson or ignitable, flammable accelerant. You might come to second guess that position over time. And that report was written in November of 2017. The interview you gave was in December of 2015, right? December 31st, more than a year later. And more than a year later, you were specifically asked on 2 occasions if you had any explanation for what you described as that fireball blowing out in that house. Isn't that correct?
Not in the manner in which I've been asked today, sir. No.
You were asked point blank, do you have any explanation for what caused that? Or are you not? And you answered, no, I don't.
Today, or sir, I'm sorry.
On December 31st, 2015, more than a year after you had written your initial report, you were asked if you had any explanation for what caused that fireball. And you said, no, I don't. Isn't that correct?
If that's what my testimony was on that day, sir, then yes. But I don't recall it.
Arson investigators don't go into houses looking for potentially missing 8-year-old girls because their purpose isn't to find a person in the fire. Their purpose is to determine what the cause of the fire was, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's best done assessing all of the information at some time later, correct? Taking in what comes in from people who write their reports at the initial scene, as well as their investigations later, correct?
I believe all investigations start after the incident, sir. Yes.
I have no other questions. Thank you.
I have nothing further. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Okay. That's
And when you get outside, would you ask your firefighter, Mr. Russell, come on in? Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Russell, would you head up here, and then the judge will stop you before you get up there.
Mr. Sir.
Afternoon, before you sit down, will you raise your right hand? You solemnly swear or affirm that testimony you're about to give in this matter.
Good afternoon. Why don't you tell these folks who you are?
Scott Russell.
And obviously, we're a firefighter, and frankly, we'll be talking about you a little bit, but tell us who you are anyway.
I work with the Lynnwood Fire Department. Been there about 13 years.
Spell your last name for the record, please.
Russell.
And about 13 years for Lynnwood.
Correct.
Did you work as a fireman how many places?
Yes, I was a volunteer firefighter in the city of Marysville.
So how long altogether have you been involved in firefighting?
About 18 years.
You do you do other things besides firefighting? Are there additional medical issues that you get involved in?
You mean as far as on the job?
Yes.
Also an EMT, yes.
And again, explain what EMT is.
That's an emergency medical technician, so we go out on the aid cars when we get dispatched to an injury or motor vehicle collision, and we can assist aid to anybody that's hurt or sick.
Tell us, if you would, a little bit about the training you had to be an EMT.
It's basically I went to Central Washington University, and it's a 1/4 class, EMT, and it's 5 credits. And you take a test, and afterwards, and get certified in the state, and you have to pass a practical exam also.
I assume a lot of the work that you do and learning that stuff is on the job?
Correct.
And how long have you been in EMT?
About a little over 18 years.
So is it reasonable that every day you're working, you're using those skills?
Yes.
And you're responding to various types of injuries?
Correct.
You mentioned car accidents, but can they be other types of injuries within the home and whatnot?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, if anybody falls down and hurts their hip or their knee or anything like that, they call 911 and we show up and help them.
Right. So if somebody falls down and they call 911, you or your colleague is the first, is somebody who shows up?
Correct.
Were you working the night of November 16, 2014, when you ended up responding to a house fire?
Yes.
Tell us about that night. What was your assignment? What was your job? How did you find out about it and whatnot?
We were at the station. I was the driver of engine 15, and the tones go off and lights go off, and we have pagers that we carry that give us the address and a brief description of what we're going to, and it was toned out as a residential house fire.
And do you have special equipment? Well, of course you do. Tell us about the special equipment that you were wearing that night.
Well, I mean, basically we're in our station uniform. In the evenings, it's just like a T-shirt and some pants, and then we go out and put on when we're going to a structure fire or car accident, we put on our bunker gear, which is our full turnouts, pants, jacket, and I was the driver, so I didn't have to put everything on, but I had everything on but my helmet and my gloves and stuff.
We saw a photo of you, I think, earlier. You get your name on the back of your jacket bottom, so people can see.
Correct.
And the fire station you were at turned out to be pretty close to the fire you were going to?
Yes.
So how long do you think it took you to get there?
It's all in the printout, but I would imagine from the time of dispatch to the time we show up on scene probably was between maybe about 3 minutes.
So you're there pretty darn quickly after the call comes.
Yep.
And do you recall with specificity exactly what time you got there, roughly what time you got there?
I don't.
When you get there, you're driving. Who else is with you?
My officer, Lieutenant Turner, and firefighter in the back. I think it was Paul Boone's appraisal.
Paul who?
Boone's appraisal?
Yeah. I'll spell it for you. It's just like it sounds.
Yeah.
When you're there with Turner mostly, we've obviously met him. What's your job? When you get there, what did you end up doing?
So it was a confirmed house of fire. We heard that, and the first-in engine had stated that they need a water supply. So as a second-in engine, we are going to supply that engine with the water. So we stopped at the closest hydrant, which was at the very end of the street. The gentleman, the firefighter in the back, gets out, and he takes our big 4-inch hose, pulls it off the back, and goes to the hydrant, and then tells us to drive. We drive up to the fire scene and take that hose off the back. Then it's my job to get out when we get to the fire scene, pull that hose off the back, and connect it to the apparatus that's actually making a fire attack.
And you came to learn that this house was on a cul-de-sac, is that right?
Yes.
So and the hydrant was in the street perpendicular to the cul-de-sac, is that right?
Correct. Across the street.
So you're tying up. Now, I actually never did show this to you, probably should have, but I bet you can recognize exhibit number 37. I'm going to turn it away from the jurors for a moment. But you recognize 64th Avenue and 193rd?
Yes, I do.
And we've talked about the fifth house in being a house that was on fire. You recognize that?
Yes, I do.
Okay. So is this an accurate picture of where you were?
Yes.
Okay. Let's spin it around now. 37. And here. I'm going to give you this to point a little, if you don't mind. So, this is the house that was on fire,
Yes.
number 5 here? And give us a rough idea.
Objection to the leading nature of the questions
Oh,
that
if it
has
is.
to strike.
No, we asked.
Sure. Okay, point to the house that was on fire.
That one right there.
Okay, and that is which number in?
1, 2, 3,
Sure,
4,
14, can you see?
5.
Oh,
5. Fifth house.
Yeah,
Wait, hold this side. 1, 2, 3, 4. That one right there.
okay. So, again, point, if you will, to roughly where that hydrant was.
Right here on this corner.
Okay. So you're hooking up here, and then how far did you drive down?
So the initial engine was out front
Mhm.
of this house that was on fire, and we drove all the way down and parked right behind that fire engine.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. So, we'll give that back.
Yes.
Thanks. So, you get down there, is the hose now, has that become extended? What's going on with the hose?
The hose we just deployed?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so the 4-inch hose, we lay it down there, and the hydrant men's down at the end of the street. We hook it up to the pumping apparatus, the attack apparatus, and then we radio back to him because it's so far away that we had to radio him, tell him to charge the hydrant, and then he turns the hydrant on, and the water comes down and supplies that fire engine.
So as you approached the house, what were you intending to do?
Our intention was to supply that engine like we were instructed coming in, and then we were going to start a fire attack on that house.
And fire attack is sort of kind of technical terms for doing what?
Putting the fire out, putting water on the fire.
Is there, at a fire scene, is there somebody sort of particularly in charge?
Yes.
And do you do anything until somebody tells you what to do?
No.
Did somebody tell you what to do?
Yes. So initially, the incident commander that was on scene, Lieutenant Putz, told us he wanted a supply for the fire, and then Lieutenant Turner was my officer that was on the engine, and he told me to finish making that connection to the fire engine, and that they were going to deploy a primary attack line to the front of the structure.
So what do you end up doing?
So I hooked the hydrant up, like I said, and hooked the hose up, charge line, and then I go up and join up with Lieutenant Turner, who's at the front door and has already deployed the hose.
As you're up there, do you get new instructions?
Initially I got there, and by the time I had gotten there, Lieutenant Turner, I believe, had already made access to the front of the house, and then I put my mask on and was getting ready to make entry into the home, and then we got instructed to go around to the back side of the home, the Charlie side.
Did you do that?
We were I was in the process of doing that. With all our hose laid out and charged in the front of the house, it makes it really difficult now to maneuver it to the back of the house.
Right.
So I had to go and get all that hose that had fallen out, because we have 200 feet of hose that was pretty much piled out of the front door. And there's a lot of lawn ornaments that were tripping hazards, and we fell down a couple times. But we went back and deployed the hose, and then they started to take it around to the back of the house. And I had bumped into the incident commander when I was back of the engine trying to get more hose. And he told me to go to check the garage for possible victims.
Okay. So, you're in the front of the house, you're starting around the left side, which would be...
I didn't start on the left side. Lieutenant Turner was going on the left. I was back further towards the engine trying to get more hose, because I knew going around the back of the house we needed to have a lot of hose to get back there.
And as you're doing that, you're told to go to the garage.
Correct.
Did you go to the garage?
After I was instructed to, yes.
And did you enter the garage?
Yes.
How?
The garage door. I pulled open the garage door.
When you pulled open the garage door, and do you know if that was flush to the ground or up a little bit or anything? Do you have any firm recollection of that?
Yes, I know that it was up off the ground approximately 12 inches. I'm not exactly sure on height-wise, but it was easy enough for me to reach my hands underneath and just lift it up. And I noticed a box container over on the other side that it was wedged up against.
And did you lift up that, the garage?
I did.
What did you see?
After I had lifted it up and got it up over my head, I looked down and I noticed a victim laying on the ground.
Describe what you saw.
I looked down, it was a female, head was towards the door, laying on her back.
Hold on a second. There's a garage door and then there's like a door to the house.
Correct.
So let's make sure we're clear. Which door was
Okay, so as I opened the garage door, I lifted up over my head. Closest to my feet was her head, and her feet were towards the man door in the back of the garage. So her head was closest to me. And and then I did notice there was a pool of blood, what I determined to be blood, that she was laying in.
Tell me more about what you saw.
That's pretty much what I noticed. It was evening and I had my mask on already and it was starting to fog up a little bit. She wasn't moving or making any noises, and yeah.
Now, the fact that you've got your mask on, is that because you're about to go into the house and fight the fire?
Correct.
And when you are...
All right, so to the extent that it's necessary, I would caution counsel on the leading nature of the questions.
Why did you have the mask on?
Oh, well, like I said before, when I was trying to make entry into the front door, be prepared, and I was going to go interior, fire, smoke-filled atmosphere, and you put your mask on, and then you can put your regulator on, and then you can go into a smoke-filled environment. And so I still had that mask on, even though we're redeploying the hose to the back.
Does having the mask on impact your ability to smell things?
No.
Does it have an ability to distract your ability to see things?
Yes.
Okay, tell me about that.
Well, the mask comes down and you have a nose cup that fits over your nose and your face, and so it's supposed to keep the air kind of contained in there, but when you don't have the regulator hooked in, the regulator actually will keep the fogging from going on your vision, but when you have the regulator off, the difference in temperatures can make your mask fog up just like a windshield in a car.
And when you saw this woman on the ground full of blood, what did you do?
Initially, I kind of scanned the area to make sure that there wasn't a lot of fire or smoke or anything in the area, and there wasn't. And then I knew I was going to need help getting her out. So I looked off to the left and saw there was another crew that was going around to the back to make a fire attack, and I yelled at them to come over and give me some help taking this picture.
Did somebody come over?
Yes.
Do you recall who?
I believe it was firefighter Beard.
Okay. And that's a woman named Melissa Beard.
Correct.
Did you and Melissa Beard do anything with this woman in the pool of blood?
Initially, before she had come over, I had reached underneath her arms and started to pull her out of the garage, and realizing that I needed help, and she came over to help me. And after I pulled her out from the garage, then she came over and grabbed onto one side, and I grabbed on the other side, and we drug her out towards where engine 14 was.
You've been in EMTs for 18 years. Did this woman appear to be conscious?
No.
Did she respond to you?
No.
Did you see any further injuries or open sores or open bleeding or anything along those lines?
I personally did not know.
You're moving her? And where did you and Beard move her to?
So initially, like I said, I pulled her out of the garage, just a little ways out, and then she came over and grabbed onto, she was laying on her back, on her, I believe her left side, I was on the right side, and we reached underneath her arms and drug her all the way out to where engine 14 was. The extent of the driveway.
Extended?
Yeah, the whole length of the driveway.
was 14. I'm going to give you a photograph we've marked as exhibit number 14. You recognize that picture?
Yes.
And does that show the open garage where you found the woman in the pool of blood?
Yes.
That's an accurate photograph of that
Yes.
off exhibit 14.
I warn you briefly about exhibit 14.
You may.
Firefighter Russell, did you take that photograph?
No.
Was that taken at the time when you removed this woman from the garage?
No.
Do you know, do you personally know when that photograph was taken?
No.
It doesn't particularly reflect the garage as you saw it on that night when you initially entered, does it? Or can you say whether that specifically represents the garage as you saw it on that night?
I can't say specifically that things haven't been moved since I saw it.
Okay. At this point, Your Honor, we'd object to 14.
Exhibit 14 will be admitted, I believe, to lay the foundation as an accurate representation of the garage as you found it.
Thank you. Thank you. If you would. Yeah, if you wouldn't mind for a minute. So, let's distinguish between some of those questions. When you got there, were these cones here?
No.
You said there was a tub of some sort, you thought?
Correct.
Is that what you're talking about?
I believe it's that. Yes.
And if you, would you come down here just a second?
Sure.
And have you point without taking Melissa's head off here. That button right here is the laser button, the one with the red.
Okay.
Why don't you point to roughly where you saw this young woman?
She was in this vicinity right here.
Okay. Now, you've done that. Why don't you move back into that loop a little further?
Okay.
And that way do it again, and that way all the jurors can probably see
All right.
it. Thank you.
Right in here.
Thank you. Moving through that. Okay, great. Thank you. Does the... Thanks. Like that, you take that. Does this picture show... Well, let me go back. You said when you got inside, were you paying attention to whether the garage itself was on fire?
Yes.
Was the garage itself on fire?
No.
Was there any fire in the garage?
No.
Does this picture, even though it was taken a little bit after your work, does that pretty accurately reflect what it looked like as far as fire damage or smoke, things like that?
I'm sorry, can you...
Sure. Does the way it looked here represent sort of the degree of any kind of fire or smoke as you were in the garage? Is it accurate to that extent?
When I initially entered?
Yes.
No.
So tell me, did you see any smoke in there?
No.
Okay. Was there any fire in there?
No.
Okay. What did you do with this woman? You and Melissa Beard are pulling her out, and who did you turn her over to, or what did you end up doing with her?
Once again, like I said, we drug her from that spot along the whole driveway out to the road where engine 14 was, and then some paramedics came over and took over care of her.
And do you recall who those were?
I do not.
Okay. Do you know Officer Miller?
Paramedic, yes.
And do you know Peterson?
Yes.
Once you turned her over to the paramedics, did you pay any more attention?
I did not. I had because I had the assignment to go back and join my crew in the
Did you
back.
start just fighting fire?
Yes.
Did you ever have any contact with a male who was there, Mr. Morgan?
No.
Thank you. Mr. Russell, I appreciate you answering my questions. I don't have any other questions for you.
Cross-examination.
Officer, just want to be clear, the thing you testified about describing was about a foot in size?
Yeah, I said about 12 inches.
Right, so I guess I'm just trying to say, is this about 12 inches, or is that about like 2.5 feet, or, I mean,
Looking from here, probably 24 inches.
and are you able to say that you're certain that's the item that you saw in the door on that night?
It looks to be the item that I recall, yes.
And how, basically, I'm going to shut down your.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
So yours was the second engine on the scene, correct?
Correct.
And at that point, Lieutenant Turner was the commanding officer on that engine?
Oh, yes.
And it was you and then the other officer with the, we'll have to get the spelling later of your third,
The other firefighter.
the other
Correct.
firefighter. And all of you are EMTs as well as firefighters, isn't that correct?
Correct.
Everyone in your department, to be a firefighter for Lynnwood, you also have to be at least EMT trained, correct?
Correct.
And some of the members are also are beyond that trained as paramedics, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And at the time that you arrived, were you anticipating doing anything other than assisting in fighting the fire, either acting as an EMT or paramedic or acting in that sort of capacity?
You're always thinking that you possibly could be an EMT, but in this instant, we had an assignment to be firefighters and go back and attack the fire.
Okay. And when the decision was made to hook up to the hydrant, correct?
Yes.
Who made that decision?
The initial officer that was on scene, the primary engine,
Lieutenant Putz.
stated that they needed a supply because it was too far away for them to hook up themselves. So my officer took that and we connected the hydrant.
Was that communicated by radio, or was that after you pulled up on the scene and then you had to leave to go to the hydrant to make the connection?
Radio.
Okay. So that was sort of your first thing on arriving, was to drop someone off to try and make that connection to the hydrant and run the hose, lay the hose line?
Yes.
And was that you who did that, or was that the other firefighter on your?
I was driving the fire engine, so the
Okay.
person that was in the back got out and connected to the hydrant.
All right, so then after you pulled your engine up and your fellow firefighters making the connection at the hydrant, were you instructed to go and back up your lieutenant at the front door?
That's the general rule, is you stay as a crew, and my assignment was to connect the next fire engine that we're supplying and then rejoin my officer at the front door.
And at the time that you arrived, was there smoke and flame coming out of this house?
Yes.
Was there smoke and flame coming out of the front door area of the house?
I don't recall.
Now, I think you'd indicated that your lieutenant had breached the front door.
By the time I've gotten there, yes.
Okay. And was he inside the house or outside the house when you got there?
He was on this front stoop, so outside the house.
Okay. And you were preparing to put your mask and stuff on because there was smoke visible coming from the house, was it not?
Correct.
Okay. And you then wind up, as you go to move the hose, you receive information that you're not going to attack the fire at the front, but assist in attacking the fire in the rear. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And as you're moving the hose is when Lieutenant Putz intercepts you and tells you about checking the garage?
Yes.
Now, at this point, is it indicated to you that Lieutenant Putz has a garage door opener that he's attempted to use to open the garage?
No.
Any indication or any discussion with Lieutenant Putz at all about efforts that he's made to access that garage?
No.
Or the basis for the information that he has that there may be a victim of the fire inside the garage?
That was the reason we were checking it, because there was a possible victim in there, yes.
Okay, and did he tell you what the source of that information about the possible victim of the fire in the garage be?
No.
Okay. And he didn't give you a garage door opener to attempt to open the garage, did he?
No.
Okay. But the garage was blocked by either that bucket or some other item that prevented it, or it wasn't touching the ground at the time you saw it?
Correct.
Was the garage door in motion?
I believe it was in motion, yes.
Okay, in motion up, in motion down when you came there?
You know, recalling back then, it just seemed like it was in motion and coming down, I would guess. I remember seeing it in motion. I don't recall exactly what motion it was in. And then when I got there, it was not moving anymore, and I opened it.
Okay. So when you got there, it wasn't moving at all?
No.
Okay. And you were able, without too much difficulty, to force it open, and did it stay up?
It did.
Okay. And now you gave a tape-recorded statement to Detective Jorgensen and Sergeant Conheim about your involvement in this incident, didn't you?
Correct.
And that was given that next day, November 17th of 2014, isn't that correct?
Yes.
And that was being done right there at your own fire station, at Fire Station 15, correct?
Yes.
Have you had a chance to review the transcript of your recorded conversation with them before coming in to testify?
Yes.
And when you entered the garage, or do you remember Detective Jorgensen asking you what was the status, fire-wise, of things in the garage?
Yes.
And you remember telling him there was very little fire, if any, that you noticed, and there wasn't any smoke, correct?
Correct.
And contrasted that in telling him to the door where initially the attack was to be made, the front door, which had a ton of fire and smoke coming out of it, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether the what you described as the man door, the door to which this woman's feet were directed, was open or closed?
I didn't notice.
And you were with this woman basically just long enough to get her out of that garage and get her to the other engine where the medics could assist her, correct?
Yes.
And how far from the garage door was the head of this woman?
I mean, initially when she was laying...
Yeah, initially when you entered that garage, about how far back? She was back from the garage door, correct?
Correct.
She wasn't lying right up against the garage.
She was, yeah, she was only in a couple feet.
And she was on her back.
Correct.
And at the time that you entered, grave concern for her health because she didn't appear responsive or conscious, correct?
Exactly.
Okay, I have no other questions. I thank you much.
Any additional readers?
One second. No, thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you, sir. You may step down and excuse.
Thank you.
When do you want, we can go either way. It's been an hour and a half, so I don't know when you want to take a break now or.
How long is your next one?
It depends on, half hour if we don't break now. Probably.
Let's go So about another 15 minutes or so, I'll call you next week. There's no charges for that water either.
Is ice
Amongst
extra?
yourselves. Huh?
Is ice extra?
Yes. We don't have it. We have stuff. We've never had it. Feel free to bring some if you wish.
You're going to stay calls Lieutenant John Putz to the stand.
Before you sit down, raise your right hand, please. You solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this matter will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Be seated there, if you will.
Thank you.
Sir, after you get settled, if you could state your name, spelling your first and your last for the record, please.
John Putz, Johnpuetz.
Judging by the fact that you had to ask me where to sit, I'm guessing you don't testify often?
First time.
Okay. Are you a little nervous?
Yep.
You are wearing a uniform today.
Yeah.
Where are you currently employed?
City of Lynnwood Fire Department.
Okay. You're a little bit back from the microphone, so maybe pull up to that. Thank you very much. And how are you so employed by the fire department?
I am a fire lieutenant for
Okay.
burst suppression
Okay.
group.
And how long have you been working for the fire department?
16 years.
Any previous fire experience before Lynnwood?
Briefly in King County, a fire district no longer exists.
Okay.
6 months.
Partnership no longer exists.
The fire district no longer exists that I used to work for.
We've heard this a few times, but can you go through your own training that you had to go through in order to get this job?
Our initial training, my path began with EMT. I took my EMT courses at Edmonds Community College. Then I became a volunteer at Lynnwood, then went into the Fire Academy. The time was 9 weeks of North Bend Fire Academy training. Once that was done, I was still a volunteer until I took the test and was hired in May of '99. And then that's,
And do you have any other specialties other than just fighting fires? I say just, but you know.
just firefighter EMT.
And so you're an EMT.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
It's emergency medical technician. All of us in our department are at least to the basic level of that. So I'm a basic EMT with firefighter. I have basic medical skills and training.
Okay. And what kind of training or schooling did you have to go through in order to become an EMT?
That was a quarter of school at a community college at the time that I took it. I couldn't tell you the hours, but it was a quarter of school, and at the end of the school I took a test and went through the training a couple times a week.
We've heard some testimony today about somebody being a paramedic.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between a paramedic and an EMT?
So the EMT has a hyphenation next to it where it's either a B, a basic, like I am, or a P, a paramedic, which is a higher level of training, longer and higher level.
Okay. And did you respond to a house fire on November 16th, 2014?
Yes.
And around what time did that call come in?
7 p.m.
And so how long did it take you to get to the actual fire?
3 or 4 minutes from the time I was dispatched.
Was anybody else on scene when you arrived?
Nobody. No fire department personnel.
Any medical personnel or anybody like that on scene?
No.
Who was on scene?
There was a neighbor person that I saw, and off to the left, and other. I'm assuming neighbors looking at the site.
Is it pretty typical for neighbors to kind of come out and see what's going on?
Yes.
Okay. But you were on the first engine to arrive?
Yes.
Describe what you saw when you arrived at this house.
As I drove down the street, I saw a large amount of fire coming from the back side of the house. As I pull up to the house, I noticed large amount of smoke coming, also from the front area, most of the windows from upstairs. That's what I noticed first.
Okay. What are you trained to do when you arrive at a house fire like this?
So when you have So I'm the company officer of the first engine. My job is to, when I'm first there, to draw up a plan for what we're about to do. That plan indicates how we're going to attack that fire, and first of all, how to get water from the fire hydrant, where's the nearest fire hydrant, where's the best place to park. At that time, the fire hydrant was far away, so I had to call for another crew to lay the hose from the hydrant down to us. But I directed my crew to park in a manner that I thought was best to fight this fire. Gave my crew direction, and then on the radio, all the other incoming crews that we had, tell them what I saw we had a fire, and give them some direction of where to go. And then I took command of the fire, which is a term that we do, indicating that I'm in charge, and come see me, and I'll get you some work.
We heard testimony from firefighter Russell here previously that he doesn't do anything till somebody tells him what to do. Is that you?
No.
So who was directing what to do that night?
Initially, it was me.
Okay.
Initially, I directed the first initial until I passed command to someone else.
Do you try and be fairly consistent and have a designated plan for how to fight this fire?
Yes.
And why do you do that?
It just makes things simpler, less complicated, efficient. We get our water supply, we go into the front door or pull the correct hose line, and it's just an efficient way that we train over and over to make sure that we do it fairly similar.
Were you able to do the things you were trained to do that night?
Initial actions, yes. Once I get off the truck, my initial action is to do what's called a 360, a walk around the building to make sure that I'm aware of all sides of the building, any dangers. I was unable to do that part.
Okay, so first part is to walk around, kind of assess the situation.
That's correct.
You indicated just now you weren't able to do that.
That's correct.
Why not?
As I started my walk around to look at the structure, I found a male in the front of the house who I attended to.
Is that male located in the courtroom today?
Yes.
And is he the defendant seated here?
Yes.
Okay. Where at the house was he?
In the front of the house, in between the front door and the garage, on the other side of a parked car, which is why I didn't see him in the beginning.
I'm going to show you what's been admitted as State's Exhibit 14. Do you see that?
I see it?
Does that look familiar to you?
Yes.
So this little red dash, that's a laser pointer. Now we're going to have other pictures of the house in a little bit, but for purposes of this right now, where did you see him approximately?
Right about in here. Somewhere about in there.
Okay. Thank you, sir. And What was he doing?
He was crawling, I guess, if I could say. It looked like he was trying to get up, but not quite able to get up. He wasn't fully on the ground, but he was kind of maybe on a knee or two knees, like he's trying to get up.
Okay. Did you make contact with him?
Yes.
Based on when you arrived at the fire, did anybody else have contact with him?
No.
Could anybody else have had contact with him prior to you talking to the defendant?
It's possible.
But based on your memory, did anybody else?
Nobody. I saw no one else.
So what did you do now that you see this person there in front of the house?
So I quickly looked at him. He was moving. He was coughing and appeared to be breathing. So I redirected my firefighter to say, hey, I got a victim. Start fighting the fire through the front door. I got the next in crew. I told them that I have a victim. I'm going to attend to them. You need to finish my duty of the walk around and fighting the fire. That took less than a minute, and then I went to the victim and asked him. I asked him if he's all right. I asked him if is there anybody else in the house. I remember just assessing him and trying to see what his problem is.
Okay. Have you been trained in treating people that you find like this in or around a fire?
Yeah.
And what does your training tell you to do?
My basic medical training is: are they life-threatening issue or not? That's my first look.
Okay.
We call it sick or not sick. Is this person very sick, or are they not that sick?
Okay. And were you able to make a determination about the defendant?
I determined he was not sick at that time. He was not life-threatening.
What did you notice about the defendant?
Notice that he was acting a bit erratic, coughing, appeared to be having some sort of respiratory problem.
Okay. Did you try and assess what was causing this?
Based on the situation, I just chalked it up to he just came out of that house full of smoke. He's coughing that out.
Have you ever treated somebody that's been in a fire like this?
Yes.
What types of things do you look for somebody that has been ingesting smoke, as you say?
So a thorough exam I would go into the airway, look for soot around the airway, look for any other burn or any type of injuries around the person's mouth, face, and then the rest of their body eventually.
Were you able to do a full exam on him?
I was not.
Okay. But based on your interaction with him, did you see any injuries whatsoever?
I did not. I saw no injury.
Did you see any soot?
I did not.
Did you see any injuries to his head?
I did not.
What did you do with the defendant?
So I asked him multiple times if other people are in the house. He did not answer me. He was coughing and making groaning noises. He eventually did hold his hand up and point to the garage with the garage door opener in it. I grabbed that from him, and as I helped him up, I just pulled him away from the house closer to the street.
Did you see where he had this garage door opener?
Just in his hand.
And he handed that to you?
Yes.
Did you ever have to go looking for that in say, a vehicle or anything of that nature?
No.
After you pulled him away, where did you go?
So I pulled him to near the fire engine, near the front of the house. out away from the driveway. I told my firefighter, who was the engineer at the time, he was running the fire engine and the pump panel and getting water. I told him, look over this guy for a minute so that I can go back and continue passing my command status to other units so that the fire could be taken care of.
Had there been serious injuries to the defendant, is leaving him and telling somebody else, look over this guy, something you would have done?
No, I would not have done that if he was seriously injured.
So based on what you were saying, did he require any kind of medical attention?
I felt that he did need medical attention. I called for a paramedic unit to look him over. I did not feel he was a life-threatening event at that moment, so that I felt comfortable passing him to someone else.
Is calling a paramedic something that you would do as a matter of course for somebody that's been in a fire?
Yes.
So it wasn't anything specific to the defendant in this case that caused you to call a paramedic?
Objection leading. He's testified that he felt he did need treatment, which is why he called.
So, objection leading is sufficient. Overruled.
Can you ask that again? Standard protocol for a medic to be called, I believe, something.
Was there anything specific to the defendant that caused you to call a paramedic?
Nothing specific. It's just standard order.
Did you have any other conversations with the defendant after getting the garage door open?
No, I asked him multiple times if there were any other people in the house, and he never could speak. He just groaned, acted erratically, coughed. Never, other than pointing, he never said anything.
And he pointed at the garage?
He did.
Okay. How many fires can you approximate you've responded to in the course of your career?
100, over 100, my 15 years, 16 years.
And of those, have you treated people that have been suffering from burns, injuries, smoke inhalation?
Not very many. A couple, if I had to think.
Have you ever seen anybody acting in the manner the defendant did?
No.
You've described leaving the defendant with someone else. You have the garage door opener. What do you do with that?
So I tried to open it. I'm using it, and the garage door was erratic. It was up and down. It would not open. It was just kind of doing this up and down thing, and so it appeared to be malfunctioning to me.
Were firefighters able to make entry into the garage door?
Eventually, yes. Eventually, I asked another firefighter. I said, "Hey, go check that garage for me," and they were able to make entry.
Yeah. And do you recall who that was?
Firefighter Russell.
What was the temperature that night?
Around 40 degrees at that time.
Describe the fire. You described part of it. Describe the fire that's happening in the house when you're on scene.
So I had to pass on most of the fire attack to others. At the time that I arrived, the fire was a large fire, burning majority of the house. It was just a large ball of fire.
Was there anything unusual about the fire to you?
The only thing was that being, I believe, a Sunday at 7 o'clock at night, I was surprised that it had gotten as big as it did with people home and able to see that, and I would have expected someone to call that in a little sooner before it got that big.
Now, was it your job to determine how the fire started or why it started?
No, it's not my job.
It's your job to put out the fire.
Yep.
You indicated that normally when you arrive on a fire, you want to do a walk around, correct?
Yes.
And it's also your job to direct people to do what they need to do.
Yes.
Were you delayed in doing that?
Yes.
And how were you delayed, and what was the cause of that? And what was the result of that?
So I was delayed because I had to attend to the victim that I found. That took my focus off of the firefight for those minutes until other units arrived, and I was able to give them the firefight duties. The result, the fire eventually went out, and so
Were you able to fight the fire as quickly as you wanted to?
no, I would have. If I didn't have a victim to attend to, we would have put water in the house faster than we did.
Is it a good place to break? You can,
Yeah, we could. Why don't we do
why don't we do that?
Great.
Folks, we're going to take our afternoon break. If you would, please put the cover over your notepads. Take those back with you into the jury room and anticipate a 10 to 15 minute break, okay? Thank you. We'll be in recess.
All right.
You can step down.
You can take it home if you want. You can take it home if you want and show your honey. Your Jesse, no?
They're so fast. They're very boring. So they just go, because he's going.